Good morning. Today is the third day of February 2017, and we are joined again by our dear friend Kittu Reddy. Namaste, Kittu. For the human cycle, and our next in the series. Where are we today in the human cycle?
In 3 minutes, I'll give you the key points.
Okay.
Then the application to the collective life, and then we'll come to the rational age, leading on to the spiritual age.
Good.
So, very briefly, the few points that need to be always remembered. Human society passes through certain psychological stages, which Rabindra has named symbolic, typal, conventional, individualistic, and subjective. Not that they are separate, they can coexist in the same person and certainly in the same society. But there is the predominance of one of those, and accordingly we call that, we put a stamp on that. The next point is that, according to Sri Aurobindo, if you want to have the ideal society, which he defines, the method is psychological, self-realization. It is not by external methods mainly, but by the inner method of self-realization that one can arrive at the ideal society. The next important point in this book is that there are in the human being 5 parts which are seeking for knowledge, beauty, good, God, and life. And the instruments which are generally used to arrive at the fulfillment are reason, the aesthetic sense, the ethical sense, religion, and life itself. The next point that one must remember very clearly is that all these 5 parts go through 3 stages. One he calls the infrarational, physical, vital, rational, governed by reason, and beyond, suprarational, when the reason does not give the satisfaction to these parts. So, ultimately, whether it is reason or beauty or good or religion or life, fulfillment comes only in the suprarational. But all these here covered on the individual level. 10 chapters from chapter 8 till 17 were all discussing the individual. Exactly the same thing takes place at the social level. And at the social level, therefore, there will be an infrarational stage of society. There will be a rational stage of society. And there will be ultimately, sometime in the future, a suprarational stage of society. So we are now, both in our discussion and in the modern era, what we may call the rational age. So the 2 chapters which discuss this are the curve of the rational age and the end of the curve of reason. When that end comes, then there will be a necessity for seeking for something higher. That will prepare the ground for the spiritual age. So there are 4 chapters. First one is the spiritual age, I think it's called the spiritual age. Then there is the necessity of spiritual transformation. Then conditions for the coming of the spiritual age. And finally the advent of the spiritual age. So these are the 4 chapters which are in the last part. We have reached in our discussion, from what I remember, the modern age which is rational. And I'll read out to you the important ideas. So he says, if we may judge from the modern movement, the progress of the reason as a social renovator and creator would be destined to pass through 3 successive stages, which are the very logic of its growth. This is the important thing, which are the very logic of its growth. So the first is individualistic and increasingly democratic, with liberty for its principle. The second, socialistic, in the end perhaps a governmental communism, with equality and the state for its principle. The third, anarchistic in the higher sense of that much abused word, either a loose voluntary cooperation or a free communalism with brotherhood or comradeship and not government as its principle. So this is the logical evolution of society in the age of reason. First is individualistic. Inevitably, it will lead to socialistic and state control, and one day, inevitably, we hope that it will move on to the third stage, which is anarchistic in the higher sense of the word. Anarchistic normally means lawless and therefore confusion. But in the higher state, it will be lawless, but each living in his own true self and harmonious. So, anarchistic in the higher sense of the word.
Without the imposition of law.
Without any law. You will be the law. I'll be the law. He'll be the law. And yet there is harmony. Right? That is the future spiritual state. Because the law there will be spiritual. Today, whenever you think of removing law, you think of chaos. Right? That is not because law is the problem, that is because our consciousness is the problem. Yes. You change laws, you adjust laws, you will find always some loophole. Right? So, Sri Aurobindo, although he understands the importance of law in a modern stage, in the stage in which we are today, he believes that ultimately we will have to move to a higher state. And naturally, we cannot think in terms of mankind or even nation to start with. We have to find a society. Might be small, Rabindra Ashram, Auroville, any other ashram, where anarchy will be the principle, but there will be harmony. If it is successful in one part of the world, it will have its ripple effect. And the rest of the world will see, here is an example. Now we can try to follow. So that is why that is the tremendous importance of the ashram and of Auroville. So, now last time I think we have already discussed briefly the individualistic and democratic ideal. See, the individualistic democratic ideal is based on these things. First of all, the first assumption is that reason can give us the perfect society. It is the highest instrument. So reason can give us the perfect. And then the next thing is the essential quality of reason is to question. So it questions everything. So there is what he calls a universal questioning. A universal questioning means questioning every detail of life. Inevitably, logically, when there is a universal questioning, in order to solve the problems, there has to be a universal application to all the problems of life. Universal application of reason to all the problems of life. That is what we are doing today. The question is universal application of reason, but whose reason? Is it the reason of the people who are in power? Very risky, because they will misuse their reason for their own ends. Can it be the reason of the elite, high thinkers? It will have no meaning at all for the average man because it is far too above. Therefore, it has to be the reason of each and every one. That is the whole basis of democracy today. So when you say democracy, practically it means that once in 4 years in America, once in 5 years in India, you have the choice to participate in selecting your leader. So you have done that in November. We have selected a man called Trump. We have selected Narendra Modi 3 years back. And England has selected Theresa May and so on and so forth. Now, this is based on one very fundamental idea that reason can be the ideal governor of life. And secondly, that each human individual should be allowed to live according to his reason, provided he does not interfere with the life of somebody else who is living according to his reason. So, this is the whole structure of modern society today. And I think I've given you an example where Sri Aurobindo was trying out this ideal. So, when he was publishing the Arya, the man from the press would come once a month, I think, take the manuscripts, get them typed out and printed out. And it was a contract. Now that chap began to come late, delayed by 1 day, 2 days. So Amritsar, who was meeting him always, one day gave me a scolding. He said, "You are coming late, but why are you getting drunk?" So Sri Aurobindo called Amritsar and said, "See, whether he gets drunk or not is not your problem. Your problem is that he has to fulfill his contract, come in time, deliver the thing, and return it back in time." He said that I was trying to see how the democratic ideal works. The democratic ideal says you can do just what you like, governed by your reason, but not interfere with anybody else. They believe, it is believed by the rationalists, that if this is done honestly, we'll arrive at the ideal society. Because reason is the highest instrument. So the theory is very beautiful, right? But in practice, as he says, it does not work for many reasons, right? First is that majority of human beings do not live according to their reason. They live rather according to their desires, impulses, likes, preferences, and justified by reason. Secondly, most people reason according to others who are more intelligent than themselves because they don't have the capacity of. And thirdly, in general, one tries to impose one's rational point of view on the other person. One doesn't try to come to an agreement. You see, now this is exactly what the parties do. Every party says, do this, and what the other party says is wrong. And that party says, do what I am saying, the other party is wrong. So reason generally does not try to come to an agreement. If we tried to come to an agreement, I would see your point of view, you would see my point of view. We could sit together and find out somewhere many common points. And the points that are not common, we don't give them more importance, we keep them a little down, and we can sort out the problem. But human nature being what it is, I try to impose my reason on yours. And that is the whole system, political system today. So as he says, the individualistic ideal brings us to the precarious rule of a ruling class. Secondly, since the ideal of freedom and equality are abroad, and they are deprived, there is bound to be a war of classes. When the ideas of liberty and equality were not in the forefront, didn't matter. They accepted it. Now you are saying liberty and equality for everybody. You are not giving it to them. Inevitably, war of classes. Whole theory of Karl Marx is based on this war of classes because they are the deprived. And finally, it leads to what he calls a very fierce competition and not cooperative society. I think I answered this question to those two girls, right? Harshita and Poonam. A cooperative society. So as I said, competitive society is always we have to compete with each other. And in that process of competition, almost inevitably, almost, a fair amount of corruption comes in. One uses all kinds of methods to reach the top, whether in sports or whether in life, whether in business, whether in politics. And in fact, most people tell me that in business you have to be ruthless and tell lies, which means corruption. Might not be true, because I know that there are instances where they are absolutely honest. And I believe that honesty here in the ashram, honesty society can stand out as one of those rare societies, right? So anyway, once this comes in, the reason is this, agreed that things have gone wrong. What is the remedy? The remedy, it seems, is universal education. Give education to the whole of the mass. You will raise their level of consciousness. The problems will be solved. But a rational education necessarily means three things. Follow very carefully. First, to teach men how to observe and know rightly the facts on which they have to form a judgment. You must get all the facts before you make any judgment. Secondly, to train them to think fruitfully and soundly. Thirdly, to fit them to use their knowledge and their thought effectively for their own and the common good. He sums up: capacity of observation and knowledge, capacity of intelligence and judgment, capacity of action and high character are required for the citizenship of a rational order of society. A general deficiency in any of these difficult requisites is a sure source of failure. So you see, capacity of observation and knowledge, capacity to think fruitfully and soundly, And to act according to what you know is the truth. Right? Deficiency in any one of these is a sure source of failure. Because either your data is incomplete, or you do not know how to think, or you do not act according to what you know is right. See, this is very important. So, he says, unfortunately, the actual education given in the most advanced countries has not had the least relations to these necessities. See, it means, therefore, that you have to overhaul the whole education system by which these three qualities are developed.
Just to ask for a moment, tangentially, you may have education, you may have, for example, cleanliness in India of the roads. You may teach people to do that. Now, you have to enforce it. Now,
Till it has become part of their being, you have to enforce it.
Now, in the effort to enforce it, you also have corruption above that.
Might be, right?
Because you have, let's say, I don't want to mention names, but let's say you have a police force that a police force that can be bribed.
Right.
Where are we?
No, so to become rational, inevitably corruption will go, right? But then one has to be truly rational. That is why, as Mother says, somewhere she has said, I don't know exactly where, that it is one of the most important things to be truly rational, right? And truly rational means these three things which are given: capacity of observation and knowledge, capacity of intelligence and judgment, capacity of action and high character. You see, to be a rational being is as much a yoga as to attain the spiritual level. So that is why Sri Aurobindo has given so much importance to the development of the mind. He has written 36 or 37 volumes. Mother has written so much and spoken so much, all on the mental plane, right? Because that is a very inevitable step for the full development of the human being, including the spiritual development, right? So, unfortunately, as he says, education has not served the purpose. But then he is not that negative. He says democracy and its panacea for education and freedom have certainly done something for the race. What have they done? For the first time in the historical period of history, man is erect, active, and alive. See, these are very interesting words. Erect. Yeah. He will not bow down. He will ask why. Active. So the moment he is not satisfied, he becomes active. And he is alive, which are very great qualities. And then the next thing is, and where there is life, there is always the hope of better things. Even if it is misguided life, it will get guided. But tamasic inertia, which overtook India for centuries together, that's why they declined. Let there be life, let them go wrong, but sooner or later they'll come right. But if you have no life, you are a dead being, right? Tamas is much worse than Rajas. Rajas might go wrong, but at least it has a chance of going right. Tamas, you are dead, half dead, right? So, the second gain is that some kind of knowledge everybody has got today. Everybody thinks, discusses, doesn't matter. Men are being progressively trained to use their minds. Even if they have not yet learned to use their minds properly, at least they are beginning to use their minds. It's a huge gain in the modern world. equal educational opportunity has not been given and cannot be given in a competitive society. It cannot be, even if you want to give, by the very fact that it is competitive, you will pay in one school 4.5 lakh rupees per year. In the other poorer schools, you will pay only 20,000 per year, right? Naturally, those who don't have the money have no chance of getting that higher class of education. See, that is why Mother made our school, how much they charge? Very minimum. If you are staying at home with your parents, you don't need boarding and lodging, then you have to pay 1,000 rupees per year for education. It's trivial. And if you are staying in the boarding, you have to pay, I think, I don't know exactly the figure now, 500 rupees per month or something like that, which is nothing at all, right? Because she did not want to sell education. She wanted to give educational opportunities to everybody, poor or rich. But we have to take some money, otherwise we can't run the whole show. So that is the thing. Now see, this sentence is very important. These two sentences were given even perfect equality of educational and other opportunity. To what purpose or in what manner is the opportunity likely to be used? We give everybody equal opportunity. How will he use it? Man, the half infrational being, despite education. True?
True.
Demands three things for his satisfaction. Power, if he can have it, but at any rate, the use and reward of his faculties and the enjoyment of his desires. See, power, the use and reward of your faculties and the enjoyment of your desires. Is any man free of this? Or are there many men who are free of this? We are seeking for power in some way or the other. Even the policeman who is controlling traffic feels a sense of power he has got. The petty customs official, he can make your life miserable because he has got that power. So all men want power. Reward of your faculties. I sing well. I would like to be at least appreciated and, if possible, remunerated. True or not? And the third one is the fulfillment of desires. So, these three things in the older societies, a few hundred years back, you could get them depending on your status and birth. Those who were right down below, they couldn't even dream of them. You have removed a structure. You have said now liberty and equality. And everybody wants that. Everybody wants power. Everyone wants the reward of his faculties. Everyone wants, right? Inevitably, it will lead to what? A ferociously competitive society.
Yes.
In which, unfortunately, it is not the best that get the rewards, but the most fortunate or the men with the most tremendous drive.
Power.
Drive, to reach there. Some people will like to reach there, all will like, but they don't have a drive. There are others who, my God, you give it to them and they will go there, right? So, this is not this type of society that we wanted.
From the publication of this book, The Human Cycle,
1916-18.
to today, 100 years.
More than 100 years.
How much
years.
has changed?
In the structure of society, not much. But awareness, I think a lot. Because so much discussion on how to eliminate corruption, how to eliminate this, how to eliminate. The fact is that people are thinking.
Yes.
And they are genuinely thinking. It is not that they are putting on a pose, right? So, definitely there is progress. Because, as Shivendra says, an age of reason is always an age of progress. And I will add one more thing. When one is truly rational, one is bound to land into spirituality. Because you will come to a point where you will find that reason cannot give you the true knowledge. Yet there is a seeking for true knowledge. Then you will say, there might be something higher. You open out. And then you. So, reason carried to its logical extreme will land you in spirituality. Because you are seeking for knowledge. So, this is the next part which is very important. There is going to be a transition of the rational mind from democratic individualism to democratic socialism. Because in this competitive society, the gulfs and distances between the haves and the have-nots are enormous. And reason cannot accept this because we are looking for the ideal society. So, socialism sets out to replace a system of organized economic battle, which is the democratic society, by an organized order and peace. So the battle that is going on within the rules of capitalism is going to be replaced by order and peace, an organized order and peace. How? This can no longer be done on the old lines. An artificial or inherited inequality brought about by the denial of equal opportunity and justified by the affirmation of that injustice and its result as an eternal law of society and of nature. So you'll say, I am from a rich family. You are from a poor family, it's your problem. Eternal law of nature. That is a falsehood which the reason of man will no longer permit. Neither can it be done, it seems, on the basis of individual liberty, for that has broken down in the practice. It leads to a competitive. Socialism, therefore, does away with the democratic basis of individual liberty. It shifts at first the fundamental emphasis to other ideas and fruits of the democratic ideal and leads by this transference to a radical change in the basic principle of a rational society. Equality, not a political only, but a perfect social equality is to be the basis. So this is the whole shift. Political equality was always there even in the democratic age. My vote, the president's vote, equal. That's all. Now they are demanding social equality. So, there is to be equality of opportunity for all, but also equality of status for all. For without that, equality cannot be secured. If there is higher status and lower status, there cannot be equality. This is exactly what the mother has done in the ashram. There is equality for all. Trustees, they are doing only a work, just as a departmental head is doing a work. There is no superiority or inferiority. Of course, there is a certain superiority in the work itself, but only in that area. So, this equality again is impossible if personal or at least inherited right in property is to exist. and therefore socialism abolishes the right of personal property as it is now understood and makes war on the hereditary principle. Right? Because status comes from the assets that you have. And if I buy hereditary so many more assets, automatically I am superior to somebody else. Remove that.
And Mother said, no ownership of anything in
In
Oroville.
Oroville, exactly. And to a great extent in the ashram also. Right? So now the next question. Who then is to possess the property? The property will not disappear. It can only be the community as a whole. And who is to administer it? Again, the community as a whole. Now, what does it mean? That all of us can't run the organization. So there has to be created a set of people. That is called the state. And the state takes control of everything. So you see, this is exactly what is happening in the ashram. When the mother was there, everything was done in the name of every property was in the name of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Mainly Sri Aurobindo, because Mother was not Indian.
Yes.
When Sri Aurobindo left, Mother had to create a trust. Because all the assets of the ashram cannot belong to a foreigner. And she applied for Indian citizenship, which was not given.
Yes.
Immediately she decided to create a trust. So Sri Aurobindo Ashram Trust has been created to be the proprietor of all the assets of the ashram. Mother was the president of the trust. It was the trust that owned them. So that is how the whole principle has come down. Right? So this is socialism. It is going to be entirely administered by the trust. So in order to where is it gone? So in order to justify this idea, the socialistic principle has to deny the existence of the individual or his right to exist except as a member of the society or for its sake. This is a crucial idea.
Yes.
Right? So this is how socialism comes in. So inevitably it means that slowly, step by step, the whole property of the organization or might be of the nation, if it is purely socialistic, will be entirely in the hands of the state. So that is a socialistic principle carried to its logical, rational end.
Does the individual,
Disappear. He becomes part of the society.
and what about an election?
You see, like in the United States, in the Soviet Union,
Yeah.
there is election, but there is only one party, the Communist Party. So you have to vote for someone in the Communist Party, but somebody giving an opposite principle of private ownership and private, not accepted. Right? In America, you can have private, semi-private. You can throw all ideas. There, you cannot throw all ideas. In the Soviet Union, I think things are a little better now. I'm not sure exactly. So you see, it is a transition from individual liberty to bring about equality, which ultimately means bringing the whole thing under the state, bringing the whole thing under the collectivity. Who is the collectivity? We can't all be administering it, so it has to be the state. See, to a very great extent, or to a certain extent, the ashram is exactly that. In dining room, you have all to eat the same food, right? But Mother realized that although this is important and desirable from a certain point of view, the individualistic trend has also to be taken into account. So, what did she do? In those days, she supplied vegetables to individuals in the ashram. Raw vegetables. You could bring potatoes and cauliflowers and cabbages home and cook the way you want to. So your taste is catered to. Similarly, many foreigners could not comfortably eat the food that was given in dining room. So she set up a kitchen where, different type of food which is suitable to their taste, temperament and habit has been given. She balanced the two things. But we cannot satisfy the taste of every individual in the dining room or in the corner house. So it is very socialistic in its principle. Right? The question is that when you carry this socialism too far, it becomes a very rigid, structured society. The human mind, having tasted freedom before and found that freedom is not working perfectly, he will not accept this total loss of freedom. So something in between is struck up. That is called democratic socialism. So you have liberty and you have equality. That is a constant balance that you have to create. So in India, from the very early times after independence, we have been very much a socialistic state. We have introduced ration cards to the poor people, right? Where they get rice at 1 rupee or 2 rupees a kilo. I, who am rich or somebody who is rich, can buy basmati rice at 25 rupees a kilo. But you are ensuring that these people are getting some kind of rice at least, not always of the best kind, right? But today there's a demand more and more that we can't eat this cheap quality of rice. We must get inevitable, because when you have spoken of liberty and equality, so today most of the countries in the world have moved towards democratic socialism or socialistic democracy. Slight difference. In democratic socialism, freedom is given a little more weight. In socialistic democracy, equality is given a little more weight, right? But you have to keep balancing. And this is not a formula. This will depend on the number of poor that are there in the country. If your country has a lot of poor people, it has to be socialistic more than democratic. If almost all people have got the minimum and hardly anybody else, they aspire, then you can have democratic socialism. So this is exactly the curve of the rational age. We will stop here. Next time, we will show you how inevitably this socialistic age also will fail or will not give the true satisfaction. If you want to have the true satisfaction, we have to move to the next step. Spiritual aim in life, the necessity of spiritual transformation, conditions for the coming of the spiritual age, and the advent of the spiritual age. Right? These are the 4 things that will come up. Now, one last point I want to make. Many people, or very often it is thought that socialism carried to its logical point is communism. In many ways, yes. But in certain other ways, no. Communism doesn't believe or believes only in materialism. That matter exists, everything else is the product of matter. So there is no mind. Socialism doesn't believe in that. It is not part of socialism. Socialism is only equality of society. But communism is atheistic. Right? Socialism need not be atheistic. Right? Individuals might be, but the principle of socialism doesn't demand. There, they absolutely. Then, naturally, if the mind is a product of matter, all changes have to be done on the material plane. Otherwise, there won't be any change, right? There is a certain truth in it, there is no doubt about that. But the ultimate truth is change of consciousness. So the two have to go together. But for the communist, change of consciousness doesn't exist. The second thing is that inevitably they believe, because of the haves and the have-nots, war of classes. So Communist parties always are thinking in terms of war of classes, right? And as somebody humorously remarked, that if equality is brought about and there is no more war of classes, communism will disappear. So they like to have the war of classes. A humorous way of putting across some truth in this idea. So socialism is not the same thing as communism. And in Russia, in the Soviet Union, communism became established. It was anti-God completely. Religion was banned, right? There was a period when it happened. Now, of course, things have changed. And it was inevitable because, as Mother and Shovinda said, Russia has a very strong element of mysticism in it. You can suppress it for some time, but it is bound to burst up. It has come back again, right? But it is also important to understand that this bold experiment made by the Russians, Shovinda commends it enormously. See, this attempt to create a new structure of society because of the gross injustice of the previous system, Shovinda says it is only by leaps of this kind into the unknown, right, that forward steps can take place. It does not mean that we agree with what they have done. But if you sit static and don't make the effort, see, Russia made the effort. It removed inequality completely and brought about equality ruthlessly. Many things went wrong, but the fundamental idea to bring equality is very noble.